Welcome to the Company of Dads podcast, where we explore the sweet, silly, strange, and sublime aspects of being a lead dad in a world where men, who are the go-to parents, aren't always accepted at work, among their friends, or in the community for what they're doing. I'm your host, Paul Sullivan. Our podcast is just one of the many things we produce each week at the Company of Dads. We have various features, including the Lead Dad of the Week. We have our community, both online and some in-person events as well. We have a new resource library for all fathers. The one-stop shop for all of this is our newsletter, The Dad. So sign up at thecompanyofdads.com/thedad. That's thecompanyofdads.com/thedad. Today, my guest is Brooks Barron, a lead dad at the earliest stages with a 6-month-old daughter. Native of Colorado, Brooks took a traditional route coming out of Princeton. He went to work for a large management consulting company. He then went to Stanford Business School, a golden ticket back into the corporate world for many. But he took a different path, working outdoors in teaching and leadership roles built around the natural world. In 2018, he founded Starlight Leadership, which aims to help visionary leaders discover their soul's purpose and unleash their full aliveness. He lives in Colorado with his wife, Ashley, and their baby daughter. Welcome, Brooks, to the Company of Dads podcast.
Thanks so much, Paul. Happy to be here.
Let's start off, you and I have talked before, we talked offline. Talk about the role that adventure in the outdoors played in your own childhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I count myself quite lucky to have had access to the great outdoors from a very young age, growing up here in Colorado and with a family who was into that kind of thing. And it was one of the ways I remember connecting with my own dad, and of course my siblings and my mom as well. But I recall, being here in these mountains near where I live now in the Roaring Fork Valley, and feeling this kind of boundless sense of freedom and expansiveness in these mountains. Like, wow, how high could I go? How far? What's the world going to look like from up there? Can we go up there, Dad?
Yeah.
And it brings me a lot of joy to think back on it.
What are some of your earliest memories of being in the mountains or being in the outdoors?
Well, certainly memories from summers growing up where my family would come up from our home in Boulder to spend time at our off-the-grid mountain cabin near Aspen. And I remember going on, my first family camp out. We went to a lake called Crater Lake at the base of the Maroon Bells, which back then, wasn't super crowded. Today it's a major tourist destination. But I remember carrying this backpack that must have been, I don't know, maybe 10 pounds of weight or something, but just felt like the heaviest thing in the world. And my dad lugging his massive pack with a family's worth of gear. I remember running around the woods surrounding our cabin with my younger brother, Ben, playing make-believe, making up stories, having adventures, setting out to slay the dragons of our imagination, and just totally losing ourselves in the play.
Yeah. One of the bits of advice we give to fathers, to lead dads who reach out to us at the Company of Dads, is we remind them that, kids watch what we do far more than they listen to what we say. So when you think back of those, examples from your childhood, the things that you saw, the things that your parents showed you, that your siblings showed you, that you now incorporate into you being a new father, what are a few of those things that stand out for you?
Such a good question. Well, yeah, one is certainly that excitement for adventure and play, especially playing outside in nature and appreciating the natural world. My dad is someone who just loves being outside and loves being in wild places. And I think I picked that up from him at a young age, of just like the ability to just slow down and really open my eyes and kind of drop back into this big sense of awe and wonder at, like, wow, the the world is such an amazing place.
Yeah.
That's something I'm already really enjoying offering to Cora, who's a wonderfully observant little 6-month-old. So it's super fun to get out on a walk with her in the mornings and watch the seasons change and just see what draws her attention.
Yeah.
And that's it. The second piece is also both of my parents in their own way made some bold choices in their life to really follow their passions and prioritize what was important to them, including in some decisions that weren't necessarily easy or mainstream, so to speak. And that's, I think, been a huge influence on me and my own path. As you mentioned in my intro, kind of being willing to kind of blaze my own trail to some extent.
Yeah. We're going to get to that down below, but I want to ask you one more question about sort of the childhood. Do you think about
Great.
Your dad is a noted conservationist. He's a successful author. At the dinner table, kids always want what they don't have. At the dinner table, were there every conversation like, "Hey, mom and dad, can we go to Las Vegas, or could we go to like Los Angeles? Can we go to the most urban place out there?" Did that ever come up?
Yeah, I definitely had my version of that. I would say is probably like my middle school years. I started to really resent going to the mountain cabin. Believe it or not, it's like my favorite place in the world now. It's my soul's home. It's where my wife and I got married. But I totally had a phase where I was individuating, maybe going against the grain, and I was like, this place is boring. There's no computers or TV around. There's like all my friends are far away or at summer camps and stuff. And my parents like to kind of playfully remind me of that because it feels pretty far
I can
off.
imagine this conversation like, screw you, mom and dad. I don't want all this out here. I'm going to go live in Atlanta and sit in traffic for hours. I'll show you.
This place is so boring. What do we do? Why do we spend so much time here? They're like,
Oh my goodness. So you go east for school. You go to Princeton, and then like many East Coast schools, it's not at all strange or even unique to go the route of management consulting coming out or going to banking. These seem to be great training grounds for people, whatever you want to go on and do later on. But knowing people who've worked at Deloitte and a lot of other management consulting firms, it's the least natural world you could imagine. It's the least natural thing possible. What did you when you took that route right out of Princeton? What did you hope to achieve, and what did you actually learn from those years working in management consulting?
Well, I had always been a good student. I'd always really thrived in school, from a pretty young age and through college. And that kind of high achieving mentality had served me well to that point, So I think in part it was like a continuation of that reflex to just reach for the thing that was well regarded or prestigious or seen as successful, and to be a little more maybe candid and vulnerable about it. Another truth was that at that time, leaving my senior year of college, I was having somewhat of a mental health crisis. I had some tough things that had gone on in my life and that left me spinning out a little bit. And I, in retrospect, can see, I was just reaching for some kind of stability. And so like a well-regarded job like that felt safe. And there's another element too, which was I really had this strong desire, again, somewhat I'd say very much inherited from like the values that my parents passed down to me from a young age, but a strong desire to make a positive impact on the world.
Okay.
And like a lot of millennials, right? And I think
I mean, it's probably better than saying I'd like to go out, graduate from Princeton, and become a rapacious swindler. I mean, I think that you don't.
Yeah. Well, who knows? There may have been some. They may not have owned it, but to each their own. Yeah, I wanted to make a big impact, and I believe that getting exposure to that part of the world, to the sort of the high achieving, high flying business circles of the world, would be perhaps my best bet at doing that. I had studied public policy and then gone to DC for a summer internship between my junior and senior year, and kind of left feeling kind of jaded about the government route as a way to make real change in our time.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make a big change, and so I wanted to go learn some really useful skills and work with some really smart people and learn about what does it take to actually influence things and make change. And I would say that was, to answer the second part of your question, like I did get that. I learned some really useful skills. I worked with some incredibly smart people. And as a strategy consultant, operating in the senior levels of major big organizations, I did learn a lot about what change looks like and how, frankly, how challenging it is and how many obstacles there are to it. I also learned that that kind of bigger corporate environment really wasn't for me. That as much as I did learn and have a lot of positive experience in that job, I also was on a deeper level still unhappy. Still holding some of those deeper inner wounds from my senior year of college, and yearning for more time outside, greater connection to nature, and a more entrepreneurial environment.
Each business school in America, each top business school in America, they're not just ranked 1 through 5 or 1 through 10. They each have their own identity, and they attract certain types of people trying to do certain things. And Stanford, of course, part of its identity is the tech world. But you go to the Stanford Graduate School of Business, you also get a second degree while you're there, which I'd love for you to talk about. But up until that point, it's okay. Princeton, Deloitte, Stanford, we see where this kid's going. But what happens when you're at Stanford? What happens in the way you start thinking about, your childhood, your background, the natural world versus, they're all super smart people. You can always learn a lot from super smart, engaged people. What changes when you're at Stanford?
Yeah. Good question. And I'll actually start by, I'll let you know, actually, the change I think began even a little bit before I arrived. Like the change that started to happen was, the memory that comes up is sitting at my desk in my room at my apartment in Washington, D.C., where I was working for Deloitte. Before even applying to Stanford, I was maybe, I don't know, a year and a half into my time there or something. And I read some words by Edward Abbey. Do you know Ed Abbey? He's kind of old school conservationist and wild man. He wrote some awesome books, like one well known is called Desert Solitaire. Anyhow, he's a fixture in kind of the conservation and outdoor movements, I would say, in worlds. And he has this, I read this quote that was like the closing part of a speech that he gave to a group of conservationists some time in mid 20th century or even earlier. That was essentially, the message of the speech was, it's important to fight for the land, but it's even more important to enjoy it. And he's telling these conservation people, he's saying, be a half-hearted warrior. Don't forget to just like get out there and live and like enjoy these beautiful wild places. Breathe deep the sweet and lucid air is one of the lines, and it just hit. I broke out into tears at my desk alone, and I remember looking outside at the tree outside my window. There was some nature there, and I was like, oh my god, yeah, like I'm fighting so hard. And I was, my motivation, my conscious motivation, at least at the time, was like, I really want to help address climate change. That had been a big part of my studies at school. I was like, and that was what I was trying to kind of work my way into the energy field through Deloitte. I was like, but I'm wearing myself down. I'm not enjoying the magic that I'm trying to fight so hard to save. So that's when I knew I needed to make a change. And
When
I
you think about
applied to
this,
Stanford
this change that like
soon after.
I
Yeah.
mean, so many people go to DC. I would hope more than the majority go to DC because they want to affect positive change. They don't go.
Hmm.
Some of them
Yeah.
surely go with a cynical
Yeah.
motivation. There's cynics among us ever, but they want to do something positive. They want to find a way, to change whatever it
Hmm.
is they care about, and I may
Hmm.
not always agree with what they care about, but they care passionately about it. But it's a great point because I think of, my town in Connecticut. Um, there was a fight over our library, and the library was a
Hmm.
very old library. It wasn't really functioning anymore, and it wasn't really architecturally significant, but there was a fight back and forth over change, and it really was a bit of a pitched battle. Now they built a beautiful sort of environmentally very friendly new library, and I hope that those people who fought so hard to save this sliver of the facade that they wanted to maintain can see the joy that the kids and the adults and the
Hmm.
elderly people get from this library. Having a beautiful library, you can go and read, you can go and be outside. So that is in your brain of like, enjoy the journey. Don't just fight, 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 but enjoy the things you
Yeah.
you want to enjoy.
Yeah.
Then you show up in Palo Alto, able to sort of get, I would assume, even more skills to sort of put into
Hmm.
practice what you want to do. So talk about what happens then.
Yeah. So that's exactly right. I landed in Palo Alto, it's sunny, beautiful, amazing nature around, making great new friends,
Not 100%
learning
humidity
amazing,
like DC in the
right.
summer. Not
No,
like
yeah. And incredible trails and, the Santa Cruz Mountains right up above campus. It was riding bikes and running through the redwoods and making great new friends. Was learning amazing things about um, business and leadership, and also about clean energy and the environment. That was my joint degree was a Master's of Science in Environment and Resources, an interdisciplinary program that um, added on to the professional degree of the MBA, and I chose to focus it on clean energy because that's where I wanted to get into kind of climate tech. Um, and so I was having fun. I was like getting everything I thought I wanted, and I had this sense too of like, now I've really made it. My father also got an MBA from the Stanford of the East, so to speak, at Harvard. And growing up, I just always noted how much that experience and the connections, the friends, the network he built there at that time seemed to really create a lot of meaning in his life. And so I kind of had this feeling of like, I've made it to that point. Now my life will feel more fulfilling and more full of meaning and purpose. As that was like the thing I was really craving. Um, and after kind of my first year, um, I ended up at a summer internship at a solar energy company living near the mountains. And I once again, kind of on paper, it was what I thought I wanted and what I thought would make me happy. And yet I still found myself um, actually pretty unhappy in that job. And and even with all of the great parts of my Stanford experience that I was loving, there felt like there was a deeper layer of a longing that was very present for me, that was kind of gnawing at me, that I still hadn't really touched. And that was challenging for me. I started to doubt myself, my own ability to find
Doubt
my way.
yourself in what sense? What do you mean by doubt yourself?
Doubt my uh like it was like, wow, I've worked so hard to get into this fancy school, and I've like jump through these hoops that I thought would help me feel the way I want to feel inside, which is kind of like what Edward Abbey was pointing to in that speech, like feeling fully alive. And I was finding like, here I am, I've achieved all the things I thought were going to make me feel fully alive, and it's not quite doing it for me. So I started to question, can I actually do that? Am I capable of feeling that way, and kind of charting a path that's really so rich of meaning and purpose that I've always kind of dreamed that I could, and become the version of myself that I believe I can become. Does that make sense?
It does. I think one of the things that would really help the listeners is I, hear what you're saying is that it's sometimes in life we get pushed, and sometimes we jump. And if you get pushed out of something, you suddenly have to come up with a plan and figure out, okay, what's next? Or maybe now I can actually do what it is that I wanted to do. But you made the decision to jump, and you went to work for a whole series of different companies, Knowles being probably the best known, that teach leadership, teach life skills through the outdoors. But that was literally a leap. You could have kept on doing what you were doing, could have gone back to Deloitte in a second, would have been easy, or any other. What was that moment? Because I think it's really important for men, for fathers listening to this. What was that moment where you said, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm not going to wait to be pushed. I may never be pushed. I could be very
Yep.
successful here. I'm going to jump, and I'm going to take a chance that when I jump, I'm going to land in a better place. And if I don't, maybe I'll jump again. But I'm going to do that jump, and I think that's
Great.
such a difficult thing for a lot of people to do, to fully be alive.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Yeah. So that moment, there was like a seed planted that made that moment possible. And the seed was actually planted during my time at Stanford Business School, at the end of that same summer where I had that internship that felt sort of disappointing to me. I signed up for a Vision Quest program, which involved going out into the wilderness for 11 days and spending 3 days and 3 nights alone with no food, fasting alone in the wilderness. And it was a very transformative experience.
Do you get to go to like Ruth's Chris Steakhouse beforehand and really like fuel up for this, or do you go?
No, actually, I spent the couple weeks beforehand kind of trying to eat clean so that I wouldn't, crash too hard when I was fasting. Got preparing my body for it, but man, I sure did appreciate some good food at the end of that trip, I tell you. And it was coming out of that experience that I was able to fully touch that sense of being fully alive. Like there was some deep healing that I did on that time on the land. There was some amazing inspiration and insight that I received, a really powerful deeper connection to nature than I'd ever even known was possible. And more than nature, just kind of like something greater than myself. It was a very spiritual experience. So then I kind of came back to Stanford, and then, jumped to a couple different jobs, and fast forward a few years later, to the moment of jumping that I would say was the choice to jump. Was I had a taste of what it could feel like for me to be in my full aliveness. And then I'd tried enough different things that kind of my more the more rational kind of path was taking me, and it just wasn't quite getting me there. And so the moment was basically realizing, like, I don't know if there's going to be a better time in my life than now to take some risk. I had met my now wife, Ashley. We were dating seriously. I could sense that it was maybe, going to head towards marriage. And, but we weren't there yet, and we didn't have any kids yet. And so I thought, I'm going to really just, leap into the unknown and chase after this feeling of being fully alive, like more than the younger kind of version of me was looking for the check the achievement box that kind of, maybe society had maybe sort of told me was the thing to do, or that I had in that time of my life thought was the thing to do. Not so much the external outcome or the external perception of what I'm doing, but my internal experience of it. I'm going to index on that in my choice.
Now, obviously, for you had met somebody who's going to support you in what
Yeah.
you wanted to do. That was key. And I'm not going to ask you because in case her parents are listening, I'm sure the parents didn't say like, wait a second, you met this guy who went to Princeton and Stanford Business School. What the hell is he doing now? Like, what? Isn't there a bank that'll hire him? What is this going on here? But you do something to me that's really special. And so many people, we have hobbies, and you do something else that you enjoy more or less, but your hobby is your passion, whatever it is. You fish, you hike, you play golf, you play tennis, irrelevant. But you took this passion that you had for the outdoor world. You took your own personal experience that you'd had from your vision quest, and then of course, let's be honest, you took a tremendous amount of structural knowledge from your educational background, and you
Yep.
did something here, and it wasn't just okay. Brooks is going to do this on the weekends and
Mm-hmm.
take a 3 1 week trips a year. You had this passion to sort of like, I'm going to help other men, I'm going to help other fathers, I'm going to help other leaders. Before you even became a father, get to their full potential, or as you call it, their
Yeah.
full aliveness. And what is that moment where that personal passion that you had flipped and translated into, I would like to help others so that they can live better and be fuller, better versions of themselves?
Mm-hmm. Well, in this case, I would say it maybe wasn't a moment so much as a process. Like there was the moment of choosing to jump and fully commit to finding my own path to my own full aliveness and following, and then there was, I'd say, a period of exploration and experimentation around what that could look like. A big part of that was choosing to trust that, you know, me being the fully alive version of myself that's the version of myself who's going to actually make the most positive impact on the world. um, and so being willing to trust that kind of doing what made me come alive was not just selfish, it was also a path towards service. So I chose to trust it on that deeper level before knowing exactly the specifics of how it was going to come to pass or come together. And then it came together through working for Knowles. I'd always loved the outdoors. I had an amazing experience as a Knowles student when I was 17 years old. That was a setting where I felt myself kind of, embodying the best version of myself. And I also noticed, wow, I'm also having this really awesome impact on my students out here on these courses. And then in between those courses, living in San Francisco, following some of the seeds that had been planted in my time at Stanford Business School, in the leadership experiential education curriculum, where I'd been introduced to leadership coaching for the first time, and also found a lot of joy and excitement and aliveness in that work. I started to blend these pieces together and just follow these threads and continue to give myself more permission, like that it's okay for me to just follow what's exciting and what's lighting me up, and then seeing the results more and more over time of understanding how, when I am embodying that highest version of myself, I seem to just naturally find a way to support other people in really meaningful ways. And so I started working with entrepreneurs and founders in the Bay Area and elsewhere to help them grow and develop as leaders as they built their businesses. I continued leading courses for Knowles. And then, it sort of, the pieces wove together into one when I founded Starlight Leadership and we moved back here to Colorado, where I started, leading wilderness trips of my own, blending my coaching skill set with more of a kind of wilderness guide skill set, and then also bringing in some of those mystical and ceremonial
Yeah.
elements like a vision quest to help others kind of find their own way to on this path.
Now break it down for the person listening to this. What would somebody, get if they came to, Starlight Leadership? But what would be the reason that would bring them, and what would be what they would hopefully achieve going through what you're doing with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So people who come to me and come to Starlight Leadership tend to be in whether they maybe fully recognize it yet or not. They're in a period of transition in their lives, and it's not just transition in the external sense, but transition in the internal sense as well. Like they are maybe bumping up against the end of a specific life stage, and starting to feel the call of the next one.
Mm.
They're not quite sure how to cross that chasm. So often I work with leaders who have been successful, entrepreneurs who have maybe had an exit, or corporate leaders who have, climbed the ladder and have maybe are having a similar experience to the one I had when I was at Stanford Business School of, I thought what I really want is something deeper. How do I find that something deeper? Or sometimes I work with folks who are, recovering from burnout, and realizing they need to remake themselves. But there's also for, a real hunger for purpose and aliveness. So what I do with these folks is I support them in first kind of peeling back the layers of what I would call the older version of themselves, or the younger version of themselves that made up that life stage that's now nearing its end. There was there's always certain behaviors or patterns or identities that were really supportive and adaptive for a certain period of their life, got them to where they are,
Yeah.
but have kind of now run their useful life to an end, and they're actually often starting to feel costly. And so we work on kind of unraveling those old habits, and that takes us quite deep into the client's inner world, and kind of foundational stories or beliefs or views that they have about themselves and who they are and the way the world works. And we loosen some of those more rigid perspectives, and that opens the space for then a little more of the magic to come in through a rite of passage experience, like a vision quest or a mystical experience, that maybe they through that portal they kind of touch a deeper part of themselves.
Brooks, Barron, it's been remarkable talking to you today. I always give my guests the last word. So here's the final question for you. You've had experience as a son, obviously as a student, as an uncle. You have a sister, some children, and now you're a father. Those different identities, how does it change the way you think about you as yourself, but also what you are doing for others through Starlight Leadership?
Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful question, Paul, to end on here. The journey for me of becoming a dad has been, of course, incredibly magical and beautiful and just expansive, like opened my heart like nothing else before. It's also been incredibly challenging. And, I've had some really low moments. And I think part of that is going through a life transition of my own, letting go of needing to fully release, accept that like my old life is gone. And I need to let go of that so that I can, and grieve it fully so that I can be fully present in my role in my life, what my life is now. And my sense is, at least my personal experience is that that's a common experience for new parents. And it's not one it's one that parents will talk about and joke about with each other, but it's not one that's talked about maybe publicly that much. And I think it's important to acknowledge that it's not easy to bring a new human into the world. And we both know it's, moms are heroes on a whole nother level in terms of what they give to make that possible. But for dads too. So I'm coming back into my work now with a new perspective on actually how I might be able to serve other parents, and maybe in particular other dads who um, might be feeling like maybe having some of those inner struggles, but feeling like they need to kind of just stay strong and keep quiet and pay the bills and get things done and hold the ship together as we often as men can do so well. But to encourage also these dads to not do that at the sacrifice of themselves, and to really listen to and tend to that inner process that's maybe wanting to happen for them, to open themselves up to the way that becoming a dad wants to transform them into actually an even higher and better and more powerful version of themselves. um, to have the courage to be open to that process. And um, yeah, having gone through it myself and still being in it myself, that's a way that I really look forward uh, to helping others as well.
Brooks Barron, thank you again for being my guest today on the Company of Dads podcast.
My pleasure, Paul. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Company of Dads podcast. I also want to thank the people who make this podcast and everything else that we do at the Company of Dads possible. Helder Mira, who is our audio producer. Lindsay Decker, who handles all of our social media. Terry Brennan, who's helping us with the newsletter and audience acquisition. Emily Servin, who is our web maestro. And of course, Evan Roosevelt, who is working side by side with me in many of the things that we do here at the Company of Dads. It's a great team, and we're just trying to bring you the best in fatherhood. Remember, the one-stop shop for everything is our newsletter, The Dad. Sign up at thecompanyofdads.com/thedad. Thank you again for listening.